Hello, folks, and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Monday, the 25th, 24th of July. Good to see you again today. And today I'm going to speak to you for the second and last time from an idea or a quote that came from this book, A Soul-Centered Life, Exploring an Animated Spirituality. As I said last week, it's just really deep and a little, it tries to dive deep into a shallow pond, and it feels like you're breaking your neck. It's the best way I can put it. But there were a couple of things I talked about last week and this part that made me think, and for the life of me, I'm going to share this with you and then just sort of talk it out as I go, because I'm not entirely sure why it is I underlined this, but it seemed really important at the time, and I'm sure it'll come back to me as I go. So here we go. The author says, our intellectually meaningful self is more receptive than we think and is not satisfied for long with the superficial understandings we try to force on it. While today a person has access to greater information, it does not necessarily mean that he or she has greater knowledge. Our knowing can become, on the one hand, so superficial that we are afraid to engage the deeper issues necessary to confront differing points of view. Or, on the other hand, our knowledge can become so specialized that we are unable to even visit other truths due to our ideological blind spots. Spiritual life, taken as the life of the soul, breaks down these obstacles and integrates one's life experience in a fashion satisfying the human understanding. Spirituality, or the spiritual life of the soul, needs to understand, but in a way that satisfies the lived reality. I have actually been thinking a lot about knowledge and knowing things lately, because it feels like more than ever we have knowledge at our fingertips. Rob and I were driving home from Lloydminster a week ago on Sunday, and he asked a question about something that we were listening to the radio. We listen to Y2 Country sometimes, and he asked, like, is Trace Atkins still on? We haven't heard him in a while. So I thought, I'll just Google that. And I looked it up, and it appears that he hasn't been with Y2 Country for a while, and a few months anyway. And it's like, okay. And then we got talking about the fact that anymore, we can, if we have a question about something or we wonder something, we can just look it up. And we don't have to look it up in a book. We can look it up on Google. The question being, is Google reliable? Who put the information in there in the first place? But this sort of understanding about information and having knowledge. And we started also talking then about what did we do back when? And his response to me was, we wondered. We just didn't know. We wondered. I also got thinking about when I was a kid, my mom had the Encyclopedia Britannica, the whole A to Z that she bought when we were, I think, like in the early 70s. And I remember that was our go-to. Like, I remember being in grade 2 doing a project and having to go to the Encyclopedia Britannica to look up something about, I don't know, penguins or whatever it was I was doing. And I was so excited to know that there was a place I could go to, easily accessible, where I could find out information. And in finding out that information was exciting. I learned what it wasn't penguins, but it was some kind of bird, I think. But being able to find out something about what I was looking for, having that information at my fingertips, was so exciting. And then later, still in St. Thomas, so probably grade 3, I think, maybe grade 3, I was working on a badge for brownies, and it required me having to go to the library and do some research. And I remember finding 6 different books on whatever the topic was, and how exciting it was. These books with the beautiful pages and the silky sort of, smooth pages and the color pictures, and finding all this information and writing it all down and having to put together a paper about it. It felt like I was the effort and the information I received at grade 2 or grade 3, whatever it was I was then. Looking back, it felt like I put as much effort into it as I did into my 20,000 word paper in third year university. I mean, it was incredible, this research I was doing. And I was so excited to know about this information. I think the brownie badge. I think it was about a city someplace, or a tourist spot like in Italy or something. But it was so exciting to realize this information is right there. And these days, information is at our fingertips. As I am recording this, I could be Googling on the same computer, asking questions about whatever it is I want to know. And chances are the internet would have some answer for me. Now, whether or not that answer was correct and the information was true is another question. I remember being in my master's degree, and our professor, our Old Testament professor, Gord Hamilton, warned us that we were to be very careful, that any research project we did had to have it had to have at least one internet, on the web source, one thing cited. But we couldn't have more than three, because the problem was that we could not verify the information that was put on the web. There are certain things you could do, like check your source. Is it coming from, Harvard Divinity School or things like that? But at the same time, how do you actually check that? Versus the fact checking you could know would be done by picking up a text from the library, something that had been researched and proven, and the thesis had been checked and questioned and then published. The idea of fact checking that information. Who would have thought that we would need to fact check years ago? When I was a kid, going to the library or looking in Encyclopedia Britannica, that was the fact checking. These are reliable sources where I can go for information. And in my mind, I thought that was knowledge. But the thing is, there's a big difference between having information and having knowledge. And I think part of that is experiential. For me anyway, and somebody who's into semantics can correct me, and please do so. But for me, having information, knowing what the facts are, is something I can get from a textbook, or I can get from Wikipedia and hope for the best. But it's something that is something that can be known, but it isn't necessarily, in my thinking, knowledge. And again, if I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me. In my life, I think of knowledge as that stuff, those facts that I have learned, and then the knowledge part comes when I have applied them to my life. So as a Christian, I can look at the scripture and at the Bible and the New Testament in particular, and the Gospels more specifically. I can look at extra biblical documents, like those documents that are not in the Bible, but are contemporary to the Bible. Historical documents that reference Jesus and things like that. And there are some that do. And those things are all things that I can check. They are facts. My knowledge of what it is to be Christian, those are the facts of Christianity. My knowledge of what it is to be Christian is how I live those facts. The fact that Jesus lived and died as one of us. How does that impact me? How does that impact the way I live my life and understand what it is to be a Christian? Then we can get into the knowledge, the spiritual knowledge, that Jesus lived and died as a human being, but we also believe, those of us who are Christian, also believe that he rose from the dead. We have our knowledge of that information, the facts, so to speak, from that coming from Scripture. That is our playbook. That's our textbook that says these are the things that we know. How I live that out is my knowledge of Christianity. How do I interact with the fact that Jesus lived and died as a human being, but then came back to life and then ascended and went to heaven? How do I live out that knowledge? My spiritual life, I think, is that bridge. Maybe this is what the author was getting at, is that bridge between here, the information, the facts that I know to be true, or the facts that I have, and this living over here in this life, this how I live out my life because of these facts. I think my spirituality is that bridge between them, that place where the information goes back and forth. And I think that with true knowledge, it is back and forth. Someone could come to me and say, well, there have been new revelations. We have new information about what you believe from the Bible. And that happens. That does happen. When I was a child, I believed in the whole the whole Noah's Ark, and I believed in Adam and Eve, and that was exactly the way it was. And as I've gotten older, and that information helped, walked across that bridge of spirituality and helped me to become the Christian I was becoming. And then as I was older, and my knowledge, my spiritual knowledge became more mature, I was able to let that walk back across the bridge to say, well, was that literal? Were Adam and Eve, was that literal? Was Noah's Ark literal? Was the Tower of Babel literal? And the spiritual part of me sort of walked with that knowledge back over to here to my spiritual knowledge and said, well, no, I don't think it was literal. I think it was our way of understanding what was happening. This is what God needs us to understand. And in our finite minds, we need story. We need things like facts to help us. For me, growing up and becoming an adult, and hopefully a relatively mature adult, and a Christian adult at that, requires of me that I am able to take a look at facts and acknowledge what is the truth within those facts. What is the overarching sense of what is real in here? And then march them across this bridge so that I can internalize and spiritualize those things and develop who I am as a Christian. But that doesn't mean that those things necessarily, those myths, those stories, were actual fact. The same way as I can't prove that something that somebody has put up on Wikipedia is actually true, absolute 100% verifiable fact. I don't know that. I have to take some things on trust. Does it matter to me if Adam was literally created out of the dust and then God put Adam to sleep and took out Adam's rib and created Eve from that? No, it doesn't matter to me if that is the literal truth. It doesn't need to be for me. Because in walking across that bridge from fact and information to knowledge, I have developed and come to understand it isn't the idea of a fact that is the most important. It is the understanding, it is the implication and the application of that fact, whether it is true or not, that has created me to be who I am as a Christian, as a woman, as a priest, as a mother, as a stepmother, as a wife, a friend, all these things. Is the information that I learned way back when, is it absolutely, if who I am today, dependent on that being absolute fact? No. Does it depend on that being truth? I think so. And so as I wrap this up, thinking about spirituality and information and knowledge, I think what I'm beginning to understand is that knowledge doesn't have to be fact-based. Knowledge can come from a truth. And a truth isn't always 100% verifiable 2 plus 2 equals 4. Sometimes truth indeed does come from myth. It comes from story. It comes from a lived experience from which we extract the truth. So I hope you're not as confused as I am right now, because I've got myself right discombobulated and I've given myself a lot to think of for the rest of the day. It's a great way to start the week, isn't it? Have a great day. God bless, and I'll see you again tomorrow for Church at Home with Rachel.